Hello, my name is Zachary Roberts, and I'm going to be talking about what it's really like to be a chef. I'll just give you a little background of where it started. It was back in 2018, 2019 when I was first out of high school. No, it was 2020 going into during COVID year. And I started off at the Hotel Settles here in Big Spring, Texas. And I was a dishwasher. That's where I started off at. And you got to start at the bottom before you can get to the top. And it wasn't easy being a dishwasher. I would work sometimes from open to close. That would be like 6 a.m. to all the way to like 9, 10 o'clock at night. Or sometimes I would have short shifts. I was at the Hotel Settles for a while, about 7 years. And doing that, starting off in dish pit, it's kind of like the grunt work where you start at the bottom. Not only that, being a dishwasher, you also got to obtain a lot of prep work, cutting Brussels sprouts, cutting potatoes, peeling potatoes, a lot of drama that happened in there as well, considering that being part of something like a new environment for me, knowing that I didn't really work in, like I worked in fast food, but you know, starting at a dish pit, I felt like I wasn't going to go anywhere from there. And then I ended up in 2020 going to 2021. During that new year, I ended up getting laid off because it's part of the industry when you're not making any money in the restaurant. The most consistent thing about being in a restaurant is the inconsistency that's part of it. I was laid off, and then I ended up finding another job at a place called Aussie's Loft, and I did that for a little bit. I ended up being a cook there and a prep worker as well. There I really learned the depth of being in the kitchen. What it's really like being a cook before I became a chef. I've seen some things. I've seen some people on some hard drugs. I've lost a lot of friends due to drugs, due to suicide, because they decided to do the things that they did. At one point, I was part of it for a while. I was at Aussie's Loft for like at least a year before it closed down, and I was laid off there. The way I was laid off was because they didn't have no more money, but they didn't tell anybody until like 3 days before they closed. So they ended up laying me off. I ended up leaving. And then I found myself at Pizza Inn for a little bit, like 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks passed by. Not really much happened there. But then I ended up getting hired back at the Settles, and I was at the Settles for a few more years. I was under maybe 3 chefs during that time, and doing that was probably the toughest thing to endure, because my first time back at the Settles, I was a line cook, or what you would call professional way, chef de partie. I was chef to the line, and my first day there, we had a Brent Ryan reunion. In other words, the owner of the Settles, he had a reunion with his family, and Brett Michaels, I don't know if you know him, he sang Poison. He was performing there, and it was my first day ever back. And our chef at the time, Chef Bull, he's probably one of the most highest rated chefs to ever be, to be a part of coming through Texas. I bet halfway through my shift, he told me, look man, I'm gonna tell you plain and simple, you suck. You're just terrible. And then so I went in the walk-in, and I cried, and I felt like I wasn't gonna be worth anything. But luckily I had my brothers there. They told me, look man, this is part of it. I'm like, yeah. And then that's when I actually really knew that I was going to be a chef. That I was able to come back, and I finished out the second half pretty well. I mean, cooking on the line, cooking in the kitchen in general is kind of like playing football. It's kind of like a competitive sport. Um, there's always going to be, the calm before the storm. Like something chaotic is going to happen regardless of what day it is. Um, and then if it wasn't anything chaotic, it was just dead. Nothing else was going on. We were just there. And then boom, a rush would come in. And it'd be the most intense rush you would ever feel in your life. I loved cooking, but there were times where it did stretch me out to a point where I didn't feel like I needed to be there no more. It did come to a time where I ended up leaving the Settles and finding a job in Amarillo with me and my wife at the time, still current wife. And we went and worked at a place called Cassin Cork. I was there for about a year and 2 months. And that's where I really learned to perfect my skills, learned how to break down different types of cuts of meat. I learned new things. I learned how to make creme brulee. I learned how to make pizza dough from scratch. I just learned so many new things, and being a part of that was really awesome. I ended up leaving, and I came back to work at the Settles for a few more months, the Hotel Settles in here in Big Spring, Texas. And I worked under my mentor that I started with when I was a dishwasher, but I was a sous chef at the time before I left. And it was very rocky because I ended up having to find another career in the middle of that, and we really weren't on the same page all the time, despite that he was my mentor, but it just didn't feel right. I probably worked through 7 different chefs, and half of them maybe have either quit or died due to drugs, or got fired because of drugs. Being a chef is not something if you want to do it, but I wouldn't persuade you to do it, only because of all you have to endure doing it, because it's the stress, it's the mental, and it pretty much changes your perspective on how things really are in life. But if you do it, it does build something into you. It builds a character and discipline that you get to have for the rest of your life. I've learned more things about cooking than I've learned about being in the outside world, because all I did whenever I was a chef was literally go to work all day long, come home, wash the clothes I was wearing, repeat, dry, wear those clothes, take a shower, go back to work, and do that again and again and again for 7 years. I'm no longer that anymore because of the stress and because of the money. I had to, find something else to do because my career needed to be financially stable. Being a chef isn't financially stable. That's the very inconsistent part about it. No matter where you are, you're always going to find yourself somewhere else. And that's my introduction of what it's really like to be a chef, on how much you have to endure on the stress level. And it is mentally straining. There is rewarding, but there's more mental strain than ever. And that is my introduction, or my input on what it's really like to be a chef. Thank you.